This armored Batman rocks, and while I have been looking forward to this Knightmare Batfleck, I'm not expecting it to be as good as the armored one. Anyway, same box design. It's consistent across this batch of BvS movie figures. Batman Knightmare, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. Nothing much on the other side, just, you know, a continuation of the window, big window on the front. Same situation here on the back, the top of the box. Here at the back is a movie poster graphic of Ben Affleck as the Knightmare Batman, looking pretty awesome. Man, this hurts. I can be very clumsy when unboxing my figures, so I apologize to anyone I may have offended with that level of unculturedness in handling the box. Trust me guys, I too have offended myself in the process of doing so. I'm gonna keep the card and the stand in their blisters because I might sell this in the future, and that could help retain the value of this figure. Well, I already damaged the flap, so it doesn't really matter that much. Or it might. Anyway, yeah, I might sell it in the future if and when something better comes around. But for sure, Mafex has announced an upgraded version of the Knightmare Batman, because they did release it at some point. I think it's Mafex number 1. Mafex number 003, so it's the early days when they were just starting out, when Medicom Toy was just starting out with their Mafex line of figures. I saw the initial promo images and I'm stoked, to say the least. They cheaped out big time on the accessories because this is all we're getting. Binoculars and goggles. The binoculars are done pretty poorly because, the sculpt is nice, but it's just an unpainted piece of black plastic. Not even the lenses have paint on them, with some painting magic. If you have some skill in that department, then you should be good to go. The goggles, however, it's got more going on. It's got paint, it's got painted details, and better detail work overall. So for the accessories, I'll give it a 2 out of 5. These are nice, but insufficient. You should be getting weapons and extra hands for sure. All he's got are trigger finger arthritis hands, and that's not good. I don't know if any of you noticed, but it took a minute to actually cut my nails. They were long. Not anymore. In terms of the likeness, I think they pretty much nailed it. McFarlane usually does an excellent job in that aspect, as long as they're not showing the rest of the face. Otherwise it would be hogwash. But yeah, just as long as they're showing only the mouth area, they do a pretty solid job. I think it's reused from the first BvS figure they released like several months ago, and in retrospect it was probably them sampling or testing the market, seeing how well that would be received so that they can justify, releasing this batch of BvS movie figures. So yeah, that's a great looking head sculpt, probably one of the best that they've done so far. But as far as I can tell, the head sculpt and this torso are all the same. That's pretty much the extent of the reuse here, just the head and the torso. Everything else is brand new parts. I do love the color blocking here. The brown on the scarf is much darker, obviously, than more of a mocha-ish kind of brown. And then it transitions into this rock gray color going to the bottom of the jacket. So that's a nice detail. There's a gradient here. The pants have a lot going on in terms of tactical elements to it to kind of bring it to life, and while it is pretty much the same color throughout the pants, aside from of course the blacks here on the knee guards and this panel right here above, what I can only tell is a holster that doesn't really hold anything. It's just there for decorative purposes to kind of make it look more tactical. For some reason I think, or maybe it's just me, but yeah, I think there is a wash applied to it ever so slightly to kind of break up the molded details, like on the straps and on the belt and the buckles. Aside from the belt that's embedded or molded into the crotch piece, we do have Batman's actual utility belt, and the texture on the suit is nice as well. The proportions I would say are spot on, so I would give it a 4.5 out of 5 in terms of the aesthetics. As much as possible, stay away from fabrics on my figures. I do prefer my action figures to be purely made of plastic, like purely plastic build. Aside from the fragility or the delicate nature of fabric materials in general, they normally mess up with the proportions unless they're done in a very meticulous way. But what I'm saying is, fabrics do tend to fray over time, no matter how careful you are in handling your figures, and a lot of clearances need to be made. In the case of this Batman, the plastic jacket doesn't exactly get in the way of the articulation, because you can still do full-on splits just like that, and you can still kick forward, and maybe a little limited because of the crotch piece right here getting in the way of the thighs. Otherwise, the jacket doesn't really do anything to mess up the articulation from the waist down. As I can look up that much, going down, not by a lot. It's hindered by that scarf piece right there. Side to side tilt, no problem. Diagonal movement, of course, we do have that. And in general, there's a solid articulation setup for the head. Then the arms can go out that far. It doesn't need to go beyond that point, I would say. And we do have a bicep swivel that's done well enough. Double jointed elbows with exposed pins, but that's never been a problem for me. They function well, and they don't look as terrible as they normally do. Probably due to the fact that this represents the sleeves of the jacket. Then we've got a molded hinge for the wrist as per usual, and then we can rotate his hand with that articulation point. Then we have a separate hinge joint for the wrists that allows the hand to go down and up and all the way around. He can bend backward a good amount, granted that he's got a big jacket draping over his back. Bending forward, much better than going backwards for obvious reasons. I think it may be as effective as it was on the original or the first BvS figure. The jacket doesn't really pose an issue in terms of side-to-side movement for more dynamic posing, although you have to put it at an angle ever so slightly. Otherwise, it looks good. Double jointed knees work just fine, but those look ugly. The way they slice, their articulation points, still no improvement in that area. They did a nice job handling the hinge joint right here for the ankle, so the foot can go backwards that much. Going forward, just as good. Then we have a rocking motion left and right, or inwards and outwards. Of course, the signature McFarlane toe articulation, and this is one of the best toe joints that they've done. He stands very close to 7 inches at the top of his ears. In centimeters, that will be 17 and a half, more or less. And here he is, standing next to the Mafex Ben Reilly Scarlet Spider and the Night Crusader Batman, made by Mafex as well. There you go. The Dark Knight Returns Batman, made by Mafex, and the McFarlane Toys Catman. Most importantly, here he is standing next to his non-dystopian version in a full suit of armor, the Armored Batman. It's gonna be hard for me not to recommend this figure, despite it having a meager amount of accessories, just because it looks really good. He has shelf presence and he's gonna look good on your display, but I'm still gonna knock it down because it doesn't have guns, it doesn't have everything that comes with a 2-pack. Although the 2-pack doesn't come with the normal head, it only comes with the head sculpt that has the mouth area covered, plus the Armored Batman in that bundle has the battle damage deco. It's really going to depend on your preferences, but value-wise, the 2-pack is a much better deal because you're getting a lot more stuff. You get guns, you get the Kryptonite Spear, and it comes with a very nice display base. The 2-pack is much cheaper than these two purchased individually. In general, it's a trade-off where you're getting more with the 2-pack. All that to say, I'm only going to give this guy a 3.5 out of 5, despite the praises I've sang throughout this review in terms of how good he looks and how well he shines in the articulation department. Relatively speaking, this being a McFarlane Toy figure, a DC Multiverse figure, only because there wasn't any reason for them to not include any sort of weapon. It doesn't have to be as loaded or as decked out as the one in the 2-pack is. While this is nice, the goggles and the binoculars, to me, these are only secondary to the essentials such as the guns, and in this case, the Kryptonite Spear. You can give this either a 4.5 out of 5 or a 3.5 out of 5, depending on if you're willing to look past the lack of accessories, but if that does take away from the fun factor, and honestly to me it does, then a 3.5 out of 5 is probably a fair score. It's such a shame, especially if you don't have the McFarlane Toys weapons pack and having to pay extra for that. But if you're planning to buy everything in this wave, I mean, as far as the Batmans are concerned, then let's give it a 4.5 out of 5. It's really up to you how many of these figures you're able to afford or how broke you're willing to go for this wave of Batman figures from the BvS batch. But yeah, like I said, the 2-pack is proof that there was no reason for them to not include any kind of weapon in this package. They couldn't even throw in some punchy hands. This Batman is at a disadvantage with only booger picking hands. All jokes aside, let me give this a final score, an actual final score of 4 out of 5, because as much as I like to hate it on account of the fact that they didn't include weapons, which I think deserves emphasis, I just can't stop gushing over how good it looks. And I know that a lot of people have sounded their opinions about this guy being meh compared to the armored version of the Batman, but I've been looking forward to an action figure of this Knightmare Batman from that movie, so I'll take this, seeing as how legendary this figure looks just standing right there, doing nothing, and at the same time accomplishing so much with how fleshed out he looks with all those sculpted and painted details. So yeah, this is legendary. 4 out of 5. So what do you guys think? Sound off your comments below. Let's get the conversation going. Let's debate or whatever. I would love to hear your thoughts on this figure and maybe on my review as well. I hope to see you on the next one. Peace.